Evening, fishes and sleuths alike. I'm Desert Mermaid. Some of you, if you've met me in person, might know me as Mermaid Cora. And thanks for following the wave today and to Turn the Tide Thursday. Feel free to get yourself settled in, put your fins up, and tune into our Nancy Drew book today. And I would like to make an official note as well that you are free to come and go, just like the tides, and that I will not be monitoring the chat religiously. So please be patient as I look in between reading chapters. Today I decided to choose, due to the new year and with all the festivities that recently happened, to read the Nancy Drew mystery story number 46, The Invisible Intruder by Carolyn Keene. So before we jump into chapter 1, I just wanted to share the quick run me down that is shared in the beginning of the book. It says, The Invisible Intruder. Nancy Drew, forget the ghost hunt, a male voice rasps on the telephone. Despite the mysterious warning, the pretty teenage detective and a group of friends start out on a ghost hunting expedition to investigate 5 places reputed to be haunted. Danger strikes at once when Nancy tries to overtake the canoe that paddles itself on Lake Seveny. Thrills and chills mount as the ghost hunters pursue a phantom horse and ghost rider racing across the field that surrounds the Red Barn guest house. During these happenings and other weird events, Nancy finds herself pitted against a dangerous adversary, clever enough to operate invisibly. In a dramatic climax, Nancy outwits her enemy in an eerie mansion and traps him in the fantastic Room of Skulls. This unusually intriguing story will delight all Carolyn Keene fans. I'm looking forward to reading this. It's been, I don't know how long. So let's go ahead and dive into chapter 1, The Haunted Canoe. This is about the most exciting invitation I've ever had, Nancy exclaimed. Attractive, Titan-haired Nancy waved a sheet of paper toward her lawyer father, handsome Carson Drew, who was seated in a chaise lounge beside a high rose hedge in their backyard. He smiled. "It must be very special," he said. "Those lovely blue eyes of yours are fairly dancing." Nancy explained that the letter was from Helen Corning Archer, a close friend, who had been married a short time. Her husband Jim had read several articles about haunted houses, and had recently heard rumors about ghost haunts some distance from River Heights. They thought it would be fun to organize a summer vacation group to prove or disprove the stories. They have invited Bess, George, and me to join the ghost hunters. "Who else will be going?" asked Mr. Drew. "It seems to me that in a search like that there might be safety in numbers." Nancy smiled. "Well, Ned has been asked." It was Mr. Drew's turn to grin. Ned Nickerson was a special friend of Nancy's, and her father realized how pleased his daughter was to have Ned included. "And how about Bert and Dave?" "Yes, they've been invited also." Bert Elton and Dave Evans were special dates of Nancy's closest girlfriends, Bess Marvin and George Vane. Nancy went on to say that 7 couples were included. Is it okay with you, Dad? She asked. Wait until I read the letter, he teased. Helen says none of them know how to solve a mystery, and they want you to take charge. Well, under the circumstances, I don't see how you can refuse. Oh, thank you, Dad. Nancy rushed to the telephone and called Helen. Your invitation is really cool, she said. I'd love to go, and I'm sure the others would too. I'll phone them and find out. Helen, could we all meet here at my house this evening so you can tell us our itinerary? Helen said that she and Jim would be glad to come and discuss the ghost hunt with Nancy and her friends. She explained that it was not necessary for the rest of the group to join them because they already knew the plans. Before their arrival, Nancy went upstairs to make a list of the clothes she would take. I wonder what Hannah would say about this expedition, Nancy thought, smiling to herself. Hannah Gruen was the kindly housekeeper who had lived with the Drews ever since the death of Nancy's mother 15 years ago. Mrs. Gruen at the moment was out of town visiting relatives. Presently, the telephone rang, and Nancy answered it. A man's voice said, Nancy Drew? I am warning you, beware of the dead. Forget the ghost hunt. Who is this? Nancy asked, but the caller had hung up. Nancy put down the phone and stared into space. So someone wanted to frighten her into staying home. But who, she wondered. And why and how did the caller know about our trip? Then recalling she had told her father the plants in the yard, she realized that there could have been an eavesdropper behind the rose hedge. Well, he's not scaring me out of the ghost hunt, Nancy said to herself. This just makes it doubly interesting. And maybe doubly dangerous, she thought. I'll have to watch my step. About 8 o'clock, the Archers arrived. Helen was very pretty, and her tall, good-looking husband was full of fun. Within a few minutes, Bess and Dave drove up. Bess, slightly plump, blonde, and pink-cheeked, was a good sport but inclined to be a bit timid. Hi, everybody, she said. This trip sounds scary. Catching villains and turning them over to the police is one thing, but hunting for ghosts? That's something else again. Helen looked surprised. Do you want to back out? There's still time. Dave answered for her. He was a blond, ranky boy with green eyes. He gave a hearty chuckle and said, You know perfectly well Bess isn't going to back out. She wouldn't miss helping to solve a mystery for anything. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't either. But if Bess won't go, that means I can't. Bess made a face at him. You people are all so serious. Can't I have a little fun pretending to be scared? Before anyone could answer, George and Bert walked in. George was Bess's cousin, but very unlike her. She enjoyed her boy's name, wore her hair short, and liked simple clothes. She was always ready to help Nancy solve a mystery. Bert particularly admired George's adventuresome spirit. He was a good athlete, and shorter and huskier than Dave and Ned. All three were on the football team at Emerson College. The last one to arrive was Ned Nickerson. Greetings, he said. I'm sorry I'm late. Turning to the Archers, he added, Say, thanks for including me in the ghost hunt. Nancy felt that this tall, good-looking boy was just about everything a girl could wish for. He was wonderful company, lots of fun, yet serious and practical whenever the young detective enlisted his aid on a case. Because the summer evening was warm, Nancy served lemonade. Then she said, "Now that you're here, there's something you ought to know." She told about the warning telephone call. Ned gave a low whistle. "Sounds as if we're walking into trouble." "I knew it," Bess exclaimed. "I just knew it." Bert grinned. "Anybody want to chicken out?" There was a chorus of no's, which Bess joined a little late. Then Helen and Jim began to tell about the proposed ghost hunt. "Our first stop," Helen explained, "will be at Pine Grove Camp on Lake 70. It's a delightful small resort. I'm sure you'll enjoy the boating and swimming." "And where or who is the ghost?" Ned asked. Jim answered, "It's not really an apparition. There's a haunted canoe on the lake." "Haunted canoe?" George exclaimed. "How could a canoe be haunted?" "You won't believe this," he replied, "but the canoe propels itself." Bert shook his head. "Sounds impossible to me. Something must make it go." "Spooks," Helen replied. "Now I'll tell you about the next place where there's a mystery for us to solve. It's at a medium's prophecy hut. People say that during seances it always thunderstorms." "You mean that there's a thunderstorm?" Bess asked. Helen and Jim shrugged. "No," Helen answered. "The people inside hear thunder." Bess looked nervously from one to another. "I don't like the sound of it," she said. Finally, Nancy, intrigued by the mysteries that lay ahead, had made no comment. Now she urged Helen and Jim to continue. "How many places are we going to visit?" "5 in all," Helen answered. "The third place is the Red Barn Guest House. Several persons have seen a phantom horse racing across a field at night, with a ghost rider running after it." Dave burst into laughter. "This I want to see." "A ghost horse that dumped its rider?" Everyone laughed, but became serious a moment later when Jim said that the fourth stop was at a mountain-top inn. "It was once an old fort, and the ghosts of prisoners are reported to be flitting around," he announced. George's eyes sparkled. "This trip gets more interesting every minute. And now let's hear about the final place." "It's probably a dilly." Helen explained that they would not be staying at the place because it was a private home. "The owner is a skull and shell collector. We couldn't find out anything except the house is set in a huge estate, and night after night there's an invisible intruder in the mansion." "An invisible intruder?" Brooke asked. Once more the two leaders of the ghost hunters shrugged. "We'll have to track down that story," Helen replied. "Well, do you all still want to go?" "More than ever," Nancy answered quickly. "If we accomplish all this, we'll be solving 5 mysteries in one trip." "That's right," Helen said. "Can you be ready early Monday afternoon?" All said they would be, and it was decided that the 6 of them would use Nancy's car. 2 days later, the whole group met at the Archer's house. Nancy and her friends were introduced to Bab and Don Hackett, Rita and Rod Rodriguez, and Anne and Bill Blunkard. Nancy liked all of them. "Helen told us about your mysterious warning, Nancy," said Bab. "You haven't any idea who it could have been?" "No." "Sounds kind of scary," said Anne. "We'll have to keep our eyes open." The ghost hunters reached Lake 70 late in the afternoon. It was such a hot day, Ned suggested that he and Nancy, Bess, George, Bert, and Dave go swimming off the dock of Pine Grove Camp. We girls will meet you in a jiffy, Nancy said. Won't even take time to unpack. She was assigned to a cabin with Bess and George. Ned, Bert, and Dave were in the next cabin, while Helen and Jim and the other couples were in their own cabins nearby. A few minutes later, the three couples were diving and swimming in the lake. Bess looked very happy. She declared that the water was perfect. I just can't believe that this place is haunted, she said. It's too nice a spot for ghosts. But a moment later, she cried out in excitement, I see it! Over there! The canoe! It's paddling itself! The others gazed toward the middle of the lake. A long, sleek aluminum canoe with a blue stripe along the gunwale was actually paddling itself across the water. Nancy called, Let's swim out and overtake it. She made a long, shallow dive and began swimming fiercely underwater. Ned, George, and Bert followed. The chapter 2, Strange Whispering. Just making sure real quick that there is no chats. And we are good. Chapter 2, Strange Whispering. As the foursome raced along the water, Ned took the lead. I'll bet there were a couple of spoofers under that canoe, he called. He and Bert reached the moving craft at about the same time and dived under the water. Dived under it. To their surprise, no one was there. The canoe continued to glide through the water. That's strange, Ned thought. The two boys surfaced, planning to grab the paddles, which were digging in deep and fast. But with a sudden spurt, the canoe shot far ahead of its pursuers. Meanwhile, Nancy and George had caught up to the boys and watched in amazement as the craft sped away. With a sheepish grin, Ned said, No one was underneath it. I guess the canoe is haunted. The unexplainable incident sent a tingling sensation down the spines of the four frustrated swimmers. There was no earthly explanation for the strange event. Let's swim back to the dock and take a motorboat, Nancy suggested. Maybe we can catch up with the canoe. When they reached shore, Bess and Dave were waiting. Did you solve the mystery? Bess asked. No, Nancy admitted, and explained that the canoe did indeed propel itself. We're going out in a motorboat to look for it. Want to come along? Sure thing, Dave replied. Ned ran to the lobby in the main building and obtained permission and a key to the boat. Within a short time, the entire lakeside had been investigated. There was no sign of the haunted canoe. Do you suppose somebody took it away on top of a car? George asked. Could be, Bert replied. Or a truck. George went on. Anybody have an idea as to what made the canoe propel itself? There has to be a reason. No one answered, but an idea was forming in Nancy's mind. She did not express it aloud because at the moment it seemed too far-fetched. But it just might work, she said to herself. By the time the 6 searchers returned to the camp dock, they had to hurry to dress for supper. A bell had already sounded, announcing the meal. The ghost hunters were given a large round table in the center of the dining room. As soon as they were seated, Babs said, I hear some of you try to catch the phantom who paddles the canoe. Nancy smiled. There must be 2, one fore and one aft. 2 paddles were working at top speed. So the story is true, Rita spoke up. You people don't want to believe in ghosts, but I'm not ashamed to. Rod laughed. Don't mind my wife. She's a student of the occult, but she has never convinced me about phantoms. The others laughed, but made no comment because a waitress came up to take their orders. We have roast beef tonight, she said. How do you like it? The girls chose medium, while the boys wanted it rare. Bert grinned. Raw meat for the he-men. You'll need it to conquer the spooks, George commented. No, all we need is Nancy Drew, Ned said with a smile. He reminded the group of the many cases she had solved, beginning with the secret of the old clock. The latest had been the exciting spider sapphire mystery. This one could be even more of a dilly than the rest, he added. There were a few other guests in the dining room, and Helen said, I was talking to the desk clerk. He told me almost no one has registered for the summer. The story about the haunted canoe and other strange happenings in the area have made people afraid to go out on the lake. That's a shame, Beth spoke up, but I can't say I blame them. Helen, you should have seen that canoe paddling itself up the lake, as if it were in a race. Jim put in. I wish I had. The owner of this camp, Mr. Lefert, has gone to a great deal of trouble and expense to make it an attractive place. He said that if things keep on the way they are, he'll have to sell it. But who would buy it now? Dave asked. Anne spoke up. We'll solve this mystery and everything will be all right, she declared. Her husband, Bill, added, I'll bet we'll be off to our second ghost hunt before you know it. Won't we, Nancy? I don't think it will be that easy, she replied. When everyone finished eating, Bess got up from the table with a sigh. I hope you're right, but that phantom peddler is pretty clever. Everyone filed out of the dining room. The evening was chilly, and Mr. Lefert had had a roaring fire built in the huge fireplace at the lounge end of the lobby. The ghost hunters gathered around and continued to discuss the mystery. Presently George remarked that she thought they should take time out from the mystery of Lake 70 and talk about something else. Anybody know a good joke? She asked. I'll oblige, Jim Archer answered. Ever hear about the cowboy who had a record for finding strays? Nobody could figure it out. It seems one of the cows told him where they were after he'd learned to moo their language. That's terrible, Don said with a groan. Got a better one? Jim asked. Sure, about the cow who jumped over the moon and came down via the Milky Way. The ensuing laughter had barely subsided when the outside door to the lobby burst open and a blast of wind rushed in. Papers were sent flying off the tables and desks. The gust hit the fireplace with such force that sparks and ashes whirled across the room. There was a mad scramble by the young people to stamp out the sparks and rescue some papers which had blown toward the fire. This is horrible, Bess exclaimed. As abruptly as it had begun, the inrush of air stopped. Nancy, suspicious, dashed to the door. It was a moonlit night, calm and clear, with bright, shining stars. There was practically no breeze. Someone deliberately caused that blast, she thought, and ran outside. She was just in time to see a man sprinting toward the woods, a huge object under one arm. Ned! Everybody! Come here quickly! Nancy cried out and sped off in pursuit. Ned soon overtook her and asked what she was after. She explained quickly, and they dashed off together. What did he look like? I don't know, except he was tall. Although moonlight filtered down among the trees, it was too dark to pursue the fleeing figure. In a few moments he was out of sight. Nancy and Ned stopped running just as a car's motor started up in the distance. He made a getaway, Ned said in disappointment. George, Bess, and the others came up breathlessly. What happened? They questioned Nancy. She told them and added, a man was carrying a bulky object under one arm. Maybe when he knew we were after him, he dropped it in order to run faster. Let's look along this path. Carefully, the 7 couples proceeded through the woods toward the road. In a few minutes, Nancy came upon an object stowed behind a tree. It proved to be a large bellows. George looked at it with a frown. So that's what made the sun wind in the lobby. The man must be crazy. Why would he want to do such a thing? Bess gave a great sigh. To annoy us. I'd say he's trying to get rid of us. But why? Dave asked. Does he have something to do with the strange canoe? Rita Rodriguez spoke up. We have no proof of that. I'm sure the canoe incident was supernatural. Her husband laughed. Honey, this moonlight has got you. He turned to the others. Forgive me, but I can't go along with Rita and her belief in ghosts. To make amends for his remark, Rod put an arm around his wife. Let's go back and forget the whole thing. Nancy suggested that in the morning they try to find out more about the canoe and also the man with the bellows. The ghost hunters said goodnight to one another and went to bed. As Bess flopped onto her cot, she said, I've had enough chasing to last me a week. About 2 o'clock, Nancy awakened. Everything was quiet except for the slight sighing of pine trees. A soft breeze had sprung up. Intrigued by her surroundings, Nancy got out of bed and went to the window. She stood there admiring the beautiful scene that lay before her. Beyond waving boughs, she could see the lake shimmering in the bright moonlight. A moment later, she became aware of 2 voices whispering not far from her window. Was this what had awakened her? Had one of the ghost hunting couples gone for a moonlit stroll? She dismissed the idea almost at once. Everyone in the group had been very wary, and it was unlikely they would be out walking at this hour. I wonder if the man with the bellows could have come back with a buddy, Nancy thought. Deciding to investigate, she put on a robe and slippers. She stepped quietly out of the cabin and cautiously walked along the side in the direction of the voices. Just before reaching the corner, Nancy stopped to listen. A sing-song voice kept repeating, Ghost owns 70 Lake. Go away while there is time. Chapter 2. The Floating Ghost. Nancy stood very still. The sing-song voice had stopped speaking. Had the person who had given the warning left? Continuing to move cautiously, she peered around the corner of the cabin. No one was in sight. She looked down the line of cabins, then hurried to the next corner and peered around it. Still, she saw no one. Suddenly, Nancy realized that the bright moonlight made her a target for an attack. I'd better get out of sight, she said to herself. The shadow from the next cabin offered some protection. Nancy scooted over to it and hugged the rough wall, while still looking in the direction from which the strange voice had come. At that moment, a filmy white figure floated from the woods. It seemed to be the ghost of a woman in a long, flowing garment. The young detective's heart began to beat faster. Was this a hoax? Or was there some truth to the legends about Lake 70? Shall I go out and confront it? Nancy asked herself. Or will it come to me? In the meantime, Bess was awakened by the moonlight, which suddenly shone full in her eyes. And turning over to avoid it, she noticed that Nancy's bed was empty. Now where did she go? Bess wondered. Nancy must have gone sleuthing, but she shouldn't be out alone. I'd better find out where she is. Bess went to the window and looked outside. Not far away was the ghost. It was floating slowly in her direction. Bess shrieked. The cry awakened George, who jumped up. What's the matter? She asked. And where's Nancy? She added, noting the empty cot. I don't know. Bess pointed a trembling finger toward the filmy figure. George's pulse quickened. Let's go out and see what it is. Not on your life, her cousin declared. Then she remembered about Nancy. But we must find Nancy. She may be in danger from that spooky thing. Within seconds, the camp was in a turmoil. All the ghost hunters emerged from their cabins, talking excitedly. What happened? Who screamed? Beth explained, but everyone looked around in disbelief. The ghost was gone. Are you sure you weren't having a nightmare? Dave asked her. Certainly not, Beth replied indignantly. Just then, Nancy walked up to the group and told what had happened. Her story sent shivers through her listeners. I'm sure it was not a supernatural incident, but someone playing a joke on us, she stated. Joke? Bess exclaimed. Aren't you going to take that warning seriously? Nancy put an arm around her chum. Not until I find out who or what was responsible. We can begin by scouting the woods where I first saw Lady Ghost. She and her friends hurried along the same wooded route the man with the bellows had taken. In a short time, Bert called out, You win, Nancy. Here's the lady. He picked up a mass of white chiffon. Rita stared at it in disappointment. How can we be sure this was the ghost? She argued. We can't, Nancy replied. But I feel pretty sure about it. Let's carry this to the lodge and examine it. When they arrived, the door was locked, but Mr. Lifford had heard their voices and came to open it. I thought I heard a scream, he said. Were you people disturbed by something? As they trooped inside, Nancy told him what had happened and showed him the mass of chiffon. Amazing, he remarked. Just another in a long series of strange goings-on here. Nancy said, I want to examine this carefully. She began to lift up the layers of chiffon. Underneath them was a long balloon. I guess when this is blown up, it will be a woman's figure, Bert said. As he clasped the object, he eyed George and grinned. My new doll, he said, then spoke directly to the balloon. How about a date tomorrow night? The others laughed. Jim blew up the balloon. Nancy carefully fitted the chiffon robe and veil over the doll. This is exactly what I saw, she said. Me too, Bess added. Isn't it ghastly? But what made it walk? Maybe, said Nancy. The bellows man urged it along. But what made it go back into the woods? George asked. No one could give an answer. Suddenly, Nancy wondered why there had been no comment from either Ned or Dave. Looking around, she realized they were not there. Didn't Ned and Dave come back with us? She asked. No, Jim Archer answered. I saw them dashing through the woods. They must have seen something pretty important. Nancy said that she was fearful the person who had rigged up the ghost might have been lying in wait for anyone who followed. Do you think we should go look for the boys? Bess spoke up. There was no need to do this, because at that moment Ned and Dave walked into the lodge. They stared in amazement at the filmy figure which Bert was holding. Is that the ghost? Ned inquired. Everyone nodded. Didn't you see the pile of chiffon on the ground? George asked him. He shook his head and said that he had spotted twinkling lights some distance ahead of the searchers and decided to find out what they were. I asked Dave to come along. Did you learn anything? Nancy questioned. Dave answered, We didn't catch anyone, but we did see two people. They had flashlights and were running like crazy through the woods toward the lake. Before we could overtake them, they got into a canoe and paddled off fiercely. What did they look like? Nancy asked. Ned said, All we can tell you is that they wore slacks and sweaters and had bushy, short hair. We don't know whether they were men or women or one of each. Nancy took the ghost doll from Bert and examined the balloon carefully, hoping to find some form of identification. Faint marks on the sole of one foot indicated a name or number. The balloon was deflated, and then she read aloud, J.B. Newton. Have any of you ever heard of a balloon company by that name? No one had, but Mr. Leffert spoke up. There's a stationery and novelty store in the town of Seventy, owned by Mr. J.B. Newton. Perhaps the balloon came from there. Nancy glanced at her watch. It was already 3 o'clock. I doubt that anything else will happen tonight, she said. Let's get back to bed. Good idea, said Bess, yawning. Mr. Leffert said he hoped there would be no more disturbances. I guess y'all appreciate a late breakfast. Bill said promptly, We sure would. 8:30 then? Okay. As Nancy started for her cabin, she told Ned, See you at 8:30 breakfast. After that, let's drive into town and talk to J.B. Newton. Bring the boys, will you? I'll ask the girls. Nancy, Bess, George, and their dates arrived at Newton's novelty shop soon after it opened. The affable proprietor asked, May I help you? Nancy smiled and said she had found a balloon in the shape of a woman's figure with the name J.B. Newton on it. I thought maybe it was purchased here. I'd like to find the owner. Did it come from the store? I reckon it did, the stout journeyman replied. Nancy said, Could you tell me who bought it? Mr. Newton smiled. I remember the purchase very well. A couple came in here a few days ago. They took a whole box of white balloons and assorted figures. Said they were giving a big children's party. Do they live around here? Nancy queried. No, I'm acquainted with all the regular inhabitants. I think they're vacationers and may have rented one of the cottages around the lake. The person for you to ask is Mrs. Jane Tarpey. She's in the real estate business. Her office is right up the street. I'll do that, said Nancy. Do you happen to know the names of this couple? They didn't say, but I can tell you what they looked like. The man was tall and slender, and he had the kind of eyes which are really deep set and look right through you. I'd say he'd take no nonsense from anyone. Wouldn't want to tangle with him, Mr. Newton laughed. As Nancy smiled, he described the woman as shorter and pretty in a tough sort of way. Both of them had dark, bushy hair. The shop owner went on to say that the woman was very respectful to the man with her. In fact, she seemed to be afraid of him. Nancy thanked Mr. Newton for the information, and the group went to Mrs. Tarpey's real estate office. She proved to be pleasant and talkative. Nancy said they were staying at Pine Grove Camp. Then she asked if any visitors had rented a cottage in the area recently. Only one, the woman replied. A couple with 8 children. They rented a house on the other side of the lake opposite your camp. By the way, the man asked me if Pine Grove was for sale. When I told him no, he muttered, I'll see about that. Nancy said, would you mind telling me the names of these people? I think I found something near the camp that may belong to them. I'll be glad to tell you, Mrs. Tarpey answered. They're Wilbur and Beatrice Prizer. Did you see the couple's children? Nancy asked. The realtor shook her head. No, the Prizers were going to go back home and bring them here yesterday. Nancy told Mrs. Tarpey how much she appreciated the information, and the group left her office. When they reached the street, George said, well, what next? Nancy grinned. I suggest we call on the Prizers. I have a hunch they do not have 8 children and aren't going to have a party. Hold on one moment. We have made it to chapter 4, the octopus, and I will be back shortly. Thank you so much for your patience, and we will go ahead and start reading our last chapter for the evening, chapter 4, the octopus. Hi, a voice called from behind Nancy and her friends. Where are you folks heading? The speaker was Bab Hackett. She and the other ghost hunters said they had come downtown to do a little shopping. How about you? We've picked up a clue to that ghost last night, Nancy said, and told of their plan to call on the Prizers. My goodness, Nancy, said Bill, laughing. You really mean business when you're on a case. Pretty soon you'll have all these mysteries solved without ever giving us an opportunity to track a ghost. Nancy smiled. Not a chance. But how about coming along with us right now and helping to interview the suspects? There was a chorus of yeses. The 2 cars which had brought the married couples to town followed Nancy's convertible down the street and onto the lake road. It was difficult to find the Prizer cottage, which stood in a wooded area some distance from both the road and the waterfront. The callers, after a long search, finally located it. This place certainly is secluded, Bab remarked. There was no one around, but an elderly man answered Nancy's knock. Is this the Prizer cottage? She asked. He nodded and invited the young people inside. They entered and sat down, some on the floor. Nancy's eyes scanned the living room, which was plainly but tastefully decorated. On a mantel shelf lay a beautiful cradle-shaped shell. I must ask him about it later, Nancy thought. Although aloud she said, Mr. and Mrs. Pricer are not home. Will they be back soon? Oh, they only come once in a while. They rented this place for me, the elderly man answered. I'm Mr. Prizer's father. I see, Nancy remarked. The place is so lovely. I should think they'd want to be here all summer. It would be especially nice for their children. Children? Mr. Prizer exclaimed. He laughed softly. They have no children. Ned spoke up and asked in what business the son was engaged. He dabbles in real estate, was the answer. Wilbur and Beatrice keep mighty busy traveling around in connection with their land interests. Instantly, Nancy recalled the loss of patronage at Pine Grove Camp, the possibility of its being sold, and also the younger Prizer's interest in the camp. She dared not ask more questions, however, for fear of arousing the suspicions of elderly Mr. Prizer. Bob inquired if he minded staying alone. Oh, no, he said. I've got my books, lots of them, and my shells. That's a beauty on the mantel, Bob remarked. May I look at it closely? Mr. Prizer got up and went to get the shell. He asked, Do you know what kind of creature made this? Babs smiled. An octopus, she answered. Right, said Mr. Prizer. Are you a shell collector? Yes, I am. And I think the story about this Argonaut Argo is one of the most interesting of all the shells. Please tell the others about it. Glad to, the elderly man said. At certain times, the female octopus deposits about 40 festoons of eggs in a cradle shell like this. The eggs are nearly transparent. Next, she waves her arms over the clusters so that the salt water circulates among the eggs. It takes about 2 months for the little creatures to hatch. During that time, the mother octopus watches over the eggs and doesn't eat one mouthful of food. Wow, Bert exclaimed. I'm glad I'm not a mother octopus. This remark sent the others into gales of laughter. When the eggs are hatched, what form are the babies in? Nancy asked. Mr. Price replied, They're miniature octopi, but they grow very fast. When adults, they often have a spread of 10 feet and weigh about 10 pounds, he continued. The octopus is a very intelligent creature. As you probably know, it has 8 legs and can swim or walk. The only hard part of its body is the beak, which the creature uses to open clams, oysters, and crabs. It eats every speck of meat without breaking their shells. How does he manage that? George asked. The octopus merely sucks up his food. By the way, an octopus is pretty lucky. It has 3 hearts. Oh, said Bess. What does it do with them all? Mr. Prizer chuckled. I suppose they provide a better circulatory system to get the blood to all the 8 legs. As the man paused, Bob remarked that an octopus exudes an inky smoke screen when it is confronted by an enemy. The moray eel is the natural enemy of the octopus. Bob asked Mr. Prizer if she might see the rest of his collection of shells. It's not unpacked yet, but I've got some beauties. The elderly man did not sit down again, and the visitors took this as an indication that the interview was at end. They all thanked him for his interesting talk, but Nancy and Ned noticed that he did not invite them to return. They mentioned this to the others as the group trudged up the hill to the road. That's a bit strange, Bob remarked. Most shell collectors are eager to show off their specimens and talk about them. When the ghost hunters reached Pine Camp Lodge, Beth suggested, Let's go to the beach and have fun. And give up the ghost hunting? George asked. Do we have to work every minute? Her cousin countered. George turned to Rita Rodriguez. Have you any hunches? You have ESP, I hear. Rita smiled. Would you like me to give some predictions about this trip? Bess forgot all about the plan to go swimming. Please do, she said. The ghost hunter sat down and remained quiet. Rita bowed her head and remained motionless for several minutes. Then she raised her eyes. I'm afraid what I see in my mind's eye is not good news. Perhaps I should not worry you with it. George said at once, We've gone this far. We may as well hear the worst. Please go ahead and tell us. Rita said solemnly, In the very near future I see an accident in a boat to a young couple. I cannot make out who they are, but the message is that it may ruin our trip. Oh, exclaimed Bev. Maybe all of us should stay out of boats. Nancy did not comment, feeling that the premonition should be considered as a warning, not a hindrance. No one else expressed an opinion. Ned broke the uneasy silence by suggesting that they all hurry to their cabins and change to swimsuits. When they reached the shore a little later, Ned said to Nancy, Did Rita's warning scare you? Are you game to go out in a canoe with me? Nancy laughed. You know I'm not scared. Let's go. Ned picked a good-looking red aluminum craft. He chose paddles and said he would sit at the stern. You can just take it easy if you like, he told Nancy, but she said she would like to paddle from the forward position. It was a beautiful day, and the sun was pleasantly warm. They had gone about a quarter of a mile when Nancy exclaimed, Ned, the self-paddling canoe is just ahead of us. He stared in the direction of the mystery craft. It was indeed the same canoe. He and Nancy began to paddle at breakneck speed after it. We're getting closer, he cried gleefully. The canoe veered toward a cove. They sped along after it, wondering if this time they would find the place where the mystery craft was hidden. Suddenly, Nancy and Ned found it almost impossible to paddle. It seemed as if some terrific pressure were pulling them backward. What's the matter with this canoe? Nancy asked. I don't know, Ned replied. We're paddling like mad, but the canoe is almost standing still. He and Nancy dug in deeper, but their efforts were of no avail. The two looked at each other in dismay. What unknown force was hindering their progress? Before either could express the thought aloud, the canoe suddenly overturned. Taken unaware, they plunged deep into the lake. Nancy immediately began to claw the water and made her way to the surface quickly. She looked around for Ned, but he was not in sight. After several seconds had gone by and he did not rise to the surface, she became alarmed. Could that canoe have hit Ned and knocked him out? Nancy dived and searched underwater. She rose again. This time she spotted her friend. The sight horrified her. Ned, apparently unconscious, was being towed ashore by giant arms that looked like those of a great octopus. Right, thank you everyone. We're going to stop there for this evening, and I will catch you guys next week on Thursday for another Turn the Tide Thursday. We will begin again reading chapter 5 and learning more about how the mystery will unfold. I hope that you guys have a good rest of your evening, that you guys can get the rest that you're in need of, and that you enjoy your weekend. Until next tide, bye.